Hello, 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 hello. So, today I'm gonna read the very famous book, Case in Point. So, before directly jumping to the practice cases, I would read the introduction of the book. Our client is Skull Candy. The company hired us to determine whether and how it should enter the variables market. Consulting firms are in the business of renting out brains. Consultants are paid to synthesize massive quantities of foreign data, toss out the irrelevant information, structure an approach to a given client issue, and hypothesize logically and creatively for people of power and influence, such as the bigwigs at Skullcandy. That's why consulting firms put so much weight on the case question, because it allows them to judge how logically and persuasively a potential consultant can represent a case. In essence, a case interview is a role playing exercise. An interview gives you a hypothetical business situation and asks you to solve it. Keep in mind that in most cases, there is no one right answer. Dialogue is always more important than consensus. You should put yourself in your client's shoes and produce outcomes. The case isn't about you, it's about the client. Everything you say and do should move the case forward in the name of the client. Why do they give case interviews? Does it really match up to what I'll be doing as a consultant? Yes, consultant firms have been giving case interviews for over 60 years. As you can see below, the process is very similar. It's the timing that's different. A consulting engagement can last anywhere from 3 to 18 months. A case interview lasts anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes. So there are four steps. Let's read that. The first is the ability to scope a problem. We should listen and clarify what exactly we are attending to, what the problem at our hand is. The second is to ability to break down problems and identify business drivers and issues. So once we are clear with the problem itself, we should break the problem into what is driving that problem, the forces behind it, the business measures, the key performance indicators, and everything. The third is to the third is the ability to analyze and find insight. So when we know what exactly our problem is, what parameters can affect the problem, we need to uh, find conclusive analysis from the data given. And the fourth is the ability to summarize and communicate. Definitely, after analyzing the data given or anything that is given, after analyzing it, you need to come to a conclusion and communicate it to the interviewer. To nail a case interview, you need to know both how to prepare and how to perform. This book will help you do both. It walks you through the overall consulting interview, teaches you how to conduct your research, tells you what consulting firms are looking for in a candidate, explores the various types of case questions, and then introduces to you to the IV case system. Case interviews given by consulting firms as well as by growing number of companies in various industries have become increasingly complex. Thus, the standard frameworks that students once used to prepare for interviews, while still valuable, are no longer enough to solve these sophisticated cases. I developed the IV case system in order to simplify things. This system will approach the answer in an organized and logical way. The difference between a framework and a system is that a framework is a tool, and a system is a process with all the tools built in. The IV case system is the most sensible and comprehensive case interview strategy you can learn. Keep in mind that the case questions help educate you during a job search by acting as a self imposed screening device. Is this the type of work you want to be doing? Is this the type of environment in which you can learn and flourish? You need to ask yourself, do I enjoy problem solving? Do I enjoy these types of questions and issues? Case questions can case questions can and should be fun. As you read on, you might be somewhat intimidated by the process. In case interviews, you get a lot to deal with in very little time. But you can possibly get it all right. But it's okay if you make errors in your cases. No one is perfect. Interviews will correct you and you can move on. It's more about the way you can recover from the mistakes than making mistakes in the first place. I have known thousands of students who got the job even though they didn't score perfectly on every case. The best way to prepare is to hunker down and A. Read this book, don't skip any pages, B. Attend all case questions, workshops sponsored by consulting firms on your or your career services office, practice with your economics professor, roommates, friends, and anyone you know who has worked or is currently working in consulting. Now, coming to the introduction for the interview itself, about how should we behave in the interview. So, coming to the interview, yeah. Relax. It's worse than you think. If you figure the odds of being chosen for an interview, having all the interviewers like you, and making it through 7 to 10 cases, you will be spending next semester tuition on lottery tickets. But you know what? You face much tougher odds when you applied to a top school. Not only were you accepted, you even thrived. Forget about the odds and concentrate on you. If there was ever a time for tunnel vision, this is it. Besides, the recruiters don't know about the time you, well, they don't know, and we are sure not going to tell them. So head into your interview with a clean slate. This chapter will walk you through a first round interview and show you how to prepare properly for each step. Some firms set up two back to back 45-minute interviews for the first round. In these interviews, one interviewer spends more time questioning you about yourself and gives you a short case question, while the other interview spends less time on you and more time on the case. Now, coming to the introduction, you get called, offer your clammy hand, and then lie and say, it's great to be here. Nothing to it. You did it the last time you had a blind date. Let's hope this one goes a lot better. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Eye contact, a pleasant smile, and a firm handshake are paramount. Questions about you. The first part of the interview is all about getting to know you. Mackenzie calls it a PEI or personal experience interview. They will ask you to come up with several examples of times when you influenced or persuaded a group, about your relationship building style, and about goals that you set for yourself and were successful in meeting. They will ask for examples of how you led a team during conflict, how you improved a process, and what were the results, and any innovative ideas that you came up with and what were the results. Interviews will ask you several questions drawn from your resume, and anything on your resume is a fair game. They may even ask, your life is a newspaper article. What's the headline? What are they looking for? Confident, easy demeanor, strong communication skills, leadership ability and initiative, ability to be a team player, and drive, aspirations, energy, morals, and ethics. In this part of the interview, you should be responding, not thinking. During the case question, you're going to do enough thinking to last you a week. You need to research about yourself beforehand. Look at the list of the most commonly asked questions in the consulting interview. You may not be asked any of these questions, but if you take the time to write out the answers or, better yet, bullet point the answers, you will be forced to think you haven't thought about in years. Don't be surprised if the interviewer asks, tell me about a time you persuaded a group to do something that they didn't want to do. You offer your answer and you then hear, great, give me another example. It is common for interviewers to ask for 2 to 3 examples for the same question. When thinking through your answers, go 3 stories deep. Remember to bullet point your answers instead of writing scripts. People try to memorize scripts, but unless you're Christian Bale, there is no way you're going to deliver your answer and make it seem real. Interviewer remembers stories and accomplishments better than the common answers. For once in your life, you want to get labeled. If you tell the interviewers your captivating tale about windsurfing across English Channel, at the end of the day, when the interviewers see your name on the list, they'll remember you as a windsurfer. Everything you spoke about will come back to them. If they see your name and think, which one was he? Your candidacy is over. Commonly asked consulting interview questions. If you take your time to answer these questions before the interview, you will be more articulate and focused when it comes time to perform. When you're ready, have a friend videotape your response. Critique your posture, facial expressions, and the confidence level in your voice. Do you say yes instead of yeah? Did it take you 20 seconds to explain something? You could have explained in 10 seconds. So, coming to a few sample questions now. Have you ever failed at anything? Say yes. Everybody has failed at something. People fail all the time. That's how you learn. Do's. Do talk about a failure and what you learned from that failure. Better yet, talk about how you failed, what you learned from that mistake, and how you turned it into a success. A perfect example comes from Michael Jordan. He failed to make his high school basketball team his freshman year, yet preserved and became a basketball legend. Have a story to tell, make it memorable. Don'ts. Don't talk about a personal failure. Stay away from anything that is going to make the interviewer feel uncomfortable. Example, I never got to straighten things out with my dad before he passed away. Or my girlfriend dumped me. Or I couldn't outrun that police car when I was 17. Interviews don't want to hear it. The other things they don't want to hear about is an academic failure. If you did fail a case, they would know about it and ask you why it happened. With which other firms are you interviewing? It's okay to tell them that you're interviewing with other consulting firms. Competition stuff, you'd be foolish to put all your energy into just one firm. However, you must be able to tell them why they are your first choice and what makes them better in your mind than the other firms. With which industries are you interviewing? Consulting goes hand in hand with three other industries. While interviewing for a consulting position, it's okay to mention that you're looking at the investment banking, private equity, or strategic planning. These positions need the same qualities in a candidate and require similar job skills. In fact, McKinsey's and BCG's biggest competitor is Goldman Sachs, not each other. Okay, so there's a lot more in the introduction part. Now I'll just do a sample case. I'll read all this in the next few sessions, maybe. So, yes, I'll just give me a second. Coming to the case questions. What firms look for? Consultants spend a great deal of their time on the road and at the client site. They work in small teams and are sometimes put in charge of groups of the client's employees. Often, consultants work under great pressure in turbulent environments while dealing with seemingly unmanageable problems. It takes a certain type of personality to remain cool under pressure, to influence a client without being condescending, and to be both articulate and analytical at the same time. The business of consulting really is the renting of brains, packaged and delivered with an engaging and confident personality. As you work through the case, the interviewer is asking, is the candidate relaxed? confident and mature, a good listener, a good communicator, engaging, enthusiastic, and intellectually curious, existing strong social and presentation skills, asking insightful and probing questions, able to determine what's truly relevant, organizing the information effectively and developing a logical framework for analysis, stating assumptions clearly, comfortable discussing the multifunctional aspects of the case, trying to quantify his response at every opportunity, displaying both business sense and common sense, thinking creatively, rolling with the punches, and finally defending himself without being defensive. Case preparation. Case interviews can be made simple through presentation and practice. I never like to equate an interview with a test, but they are similar in what in but they are similar in that the more you prepare, the better you will do. Maybe you have experienced the feeling of being so prepared for exam that you can't wait for the professor to hand it out so you can rip through it. Case questions are the same. Firms look to see whether you have that rip right through it. Look in your eyes. It's called confidence. Some of my students, even after they got the job, would come into my office and ask me to give them a case. They love doing cases. To them, it was no different from working a crossword puzzle. They loved the intellectual challenge and they learned something every time they did one. One of the best ways to learn how to answer a case is to write your own case. You are basically re engineering the process. You need to think of a structure plus the answers to all the questions that an interviewer could ask. Interview evaluation forms. Every firm has its own individual evaluation form. However, what they look for is the same. Some are broken down into analytics, structure, quant acumen, and good use of data, communication, eye contact, being articulate, listening, asking probing questions, and note layout. And personal, enthusiasm, self confidence, teamwork, original thought, and intellectual curiosity. To use one example, the Bain and Company interview evaluation form is broken down into three areas: value addition, client slash team, and reality check, plus a final summary rating. You are rated from 1 to 5 in several categories under these areas, with 5 being the highest score. Value addition. Under value addition, you have 5 categories: structured problem solving, business judgment, quant skills, creativity, and drive to results, plus a final overall value addition score, client slash team. Here are also 5 categories plus a summary score. The 5 areas of drive slash achievement, team skills, communication, professionalism, and leadership. Reality check. Under this heading, the interviewer is asked to answer 3 questions. Is this person interested in Bain? Would you have this person on your team? The airport test. Would you pass on or give an offer to this person? Summary. Finally, you get an overall interview rating. In the first two sections, that are value addition and client slash team, there are spaces for the interviewer to write comments under 2 headings: strengths and weaknesses, and topics to test in the next round. I don't care who's giving the case, whether it's Amazon, Pepsi, BCG, or McKinsey. They all look for the same things: structure of thought, confidence level, communication skills, and going beyond the expected answer. That is creativity. Types of case questions. Case questions generally fall into one of the three major categories: market sizing questions, factor questions, and business case questions. Most of the case questions you'll get will be one on one business and cases. Generally, these business cases are either interviewee driven cases or interviewer driven cases. Interviewee driven cases are very vague and broad. Here's my problem. What do I do? With cases like these, more common to BCG, Bain, LEK, Deloitte, and PwC, you will need to take great care in drawing your structure. Also, your structure should be hypothesis driven. A hypothesis is the assumed answer, and hypothesis driven mean you need to consider the case from the answer. Often cases are interviewer driven. Here's my problem. I want you to determine market size, price, break even, and profits. In these cases, the interviewer gives you a laundry list of information from which you'll determine your answers, more common to McKinsey, Accenture, and Oliver Wyman. Keep in mind that you don't necessarily have to answer the questions in the order in which they are given. Answer them in the order that makes sense to you. One mistake candidates often make is to quickly jump into calculating the market size. Always lay out your structure before you figure out the market size. Sometimes they will feed you questions one at a time. Whether fun or frustrating, all case questions are valuable learning experiences. Market sizing questions. Market sizing questions surface all the time and can come up during any round of interviewing. Sometimes it's a standalone question, but most often it's embedded in a larger case. When I hear a market sizing question, I like to label it. Is it population based question, a household question, a worldwide question, or a preposterous question? Regardless of the type of the market sizing question your answer should be based on logic and assumptions. There will be instances when your assumptions are wrong. Sometimes the interviewer will correct you, other times she will let it go. The interviewer is more interested in your logic and thought process that whether your assumptions are spot on. If you are still concerned, you can always say, I am not that familiar with this market. So if my assumptions are off, please correct me. 90% of the time, the interviewer will tell you not to worry about it. However, everything you say has the potential to be questioned. So be ready to defend your assumptions, as they should be based on some type of logic. If you just pull them out of thin air, you are risking the interviewer aggressively challenging your assumptions and your credibility. During a market sizing case, you can ask questions only if you don't understand something. If the interviewer rattles off on a string of initials, industry jargon, or slang, and you're not sure about what he means, ask. You don't lose points for asking clarifying questions. These questions are tough enough to answer even when you do understand all the information. How it works. As they give you the question, write everything down. Determine and label the question. Structure. Listen to the question. Ask clarifying questions only if you don't understand the question or terminology. Lay out your structure first and the steps you'll need to answer the question. Then go back through it with your numbers. That way, you'll get a second bite at the apple as you work through the problem again. Assumptions. Don't worry if your assumptions are off. The interviewer is more interested in your thought process. If your assumptions are way off, they will tell you. Otherwise, let it go. Base your assumptions on some sort of logic. You can group several assumptions into one number. Example, the 20% takes into account X, Y, and Z. Base your assumptions on some sort of logic and take advantage of grouping assumptions together. Math. Estimate or round off answers to make your calculations easier. Write down all the numbers. Answer. Review the final answer to see if that number makes sense. If not, say so and pick a new number that makes more sense. You don't have to go through the process again, and the interviewer just wants to make sure that you have realized that the first number didn't make sense. Key numbers and facts. When I go into a market sizing question, I've already memorized several key numbers and facts. I don't want to be caught flat footed and I don't want to pull numbers out of thin air that are going to be difficult to work with. I want numbers that are going to be easy. numbers that I'm familiar with so I can do calculations with confidence. Here are some key numbers that you should memorize. US population is 320 million. Life expectancy of an American is 80 years. Even distribution between the ages, that is, they're the same number of 2 years olds as a 72-year-old. We know that this is not true. But in a case like this, it's fine to assume. Thus, 4 million people per age group. There are 80 million per generation and there are 100 million US households. So the memorizations were 320 million people live in America. A person live for 80 years. There are the same number of 2 years old as are the number of 72-year-olds. That is 4 million people per age. There are 80 million per generation and there are 100 million US households. Regardless of what you're interviewing, you should answer these key factors for your country or region. Also, don't use your friends as a sample population. Chances are you're at an elite university and your friends are unlikely to represent the general population. Now, within the market sizing questions, there are three types of questions: population based questions, household questions, and worldwide market sizing questions. And the last is the pro preposterous cases. Coming to the population based questions. Population based questions are often broken down by generations 0 to 20, 21 to 40, 41 to 60, and 61 to 80, or 80 million people per generation. To calculate a subset of each generation, use 4 million people per year. Thus, the number of people in their 20s would be 40 million. 4 million people into 10 years. Sometimes you might want to break it down by men and women, 50-50 split. How many cups of coffee or coffee drinks are consumed in the US or a typical day? Okay. So, before gendering, yeah, so the question is very clear. In the US, how many people drink coffee on a day, on a single day? So the first step in this is to make assumptions and break the population down by generation. Determine the number of coffee drinkers in each generation. Don't be like, okay, there are 100 million people living in the US. Let's say 50% of drink those, so 50 million is the answer. No, that is not at all the right way to go to a question, because clearly, if you think about it, people in their age of 0 to 10 don't drink coffee at all. But people in the age of 30 to 40, maybe 90% of those people will be coffee drinkers. So we need to identify generation wise, determine the number of coffee drinkers in each generation. You may want to draw a chart to show how well organized you are and how logically you think. It also makes it easier for the interviewer to follow your thought process. Estimate the number of light drinkers, medium drinkers, and heavy drinkers. Assign an average number of cups per day. Review the final answer to see if that number makes sense. If it doesn't, tell the interviewer that you think that the number seems high and pick a new number that seems more reasonable. You don't have to go back through the process again. They know your process. It was just that one of your assumptions was very off. Now, starting with how they have answered this question. So, the basic assumption is that they took 320 million Americans, which was told us to memorize that. Life expectancy of 80 years, so 4 years per age, 4 million per age. Even distribution among the ages, I'm going to divide it into generations: 0 to 20, 21 to 40, 41 to 60, and 61 to 80. That means 80 million per people per generation. Reason through your numbers for each generation and fill in the chart as you go along. Kids 0 to 20. A big part of that population is too young to drink coffee. So I'll assume that 25%, that is 20 million kids do. The 21 to 40 group, I believe, is a lot higher. You have college students and workers. I'll go with about 75% or around 60 million coffee drinkers. In fact, I think that 75% number is good for the next two generations as well. I think the big difference might be found in the number of cups consumed. So it makes it 20 million for 0 to 20 and 60 million for 21 to 80 each. Next, I'd like to put those drinkers into three categories: light drinkers, medium drinkers, and heavy drinkers. Light drinkers means 1 cup a day, medium drinkers mean 2 cups a day, and high drinkers mean 3 cups a day, or let's say 4 cups a day. Light drinkers might be high school students, retirees, and people who don't like to be over caffeinated. I'll assume that they make up 25% of coffee drinkers or 50 million cups. Medium drinkers make up the bulk of the drinkers. 50% or 100 million drinkers are drinking 2 cups equals 200 million cups. And lastly, heavy drinkers who drink 4 cups a day will be the consultants and investment bankers. They make up another 25% or 50 million drinkers times 4 cups, another 200 million cups a day. So that makes it light drinkers 50 million cups, medium drinkers 200 million cups, and again heavy drinkers 200 million cups. So adding it all, it will be 450 million cups of coffee per day. Now, if someone doesn't agree with these assumptions, they can just change it and the thought process will be very same. So that is what is told us to in the book. Don't go through the same process again. If the interviewer understood your thought process, your logic, then just changing the assumption, that is the initial value, will not make any difference at all. Now coming to the household questions. There are times that when you will want to break down the 100 million US households by income level, according to a graph published in the Wall Street Journal in the summer of 2016. Approximately 30% of US households are high income, 50% are middle income, and 20% are low income. How many televisions are there in the US? Okay, so in this, it makes sense to break it by household. For coffee, we broke it by generation because that was affecting. Now, if we break it for the TV problem also, if we break it down by the number of people in each age group, it doesn't make sense because everyone watches TV. We don't know, we can't calculate. But yes, income level. Income level will define how many TVs does a particular household level have. So I'm going through the steps. Draw/slash design the chart and fill it in as you go along. Break households down by income levels. Assign the number of households per income level. Make assumptions about the number of TVs at each income level. Total them up. Add to that total an estimated number of non-household owned TVs. So they told us to memorize that there are 100 million US households. Now we will just break it down into low, medium, and high income and multiply it by, let's say, low has 1 TV, medium has 2, and high maybe has 4 TVs. So they have done it as 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now we know that 30% are high income, so 30 million TVs. 30 into 3, 90 million TVs. 50% are middle income, so 50 into 2, 100 million. And 20% are low income, that means 20 million TVs. Adding them all, it makes it 210 million TVs. Now, if the answer doesn't make sense again, that okay, there are 100 million US households and there are 200 sets of TVs of 210 million sets of TVs. So, again, our basic assumption was wrong that there are 100 million US households. We will just maybe change it to 80 million or bump it by 120 million. Also, we have to account for the non-household here. because definitely there are TVs everywhere, not specifically the households. So maybe 20 million TVs are used in restaurants, hospitals, for educational purposes, and what's not. So adding that 20 million to the 210 million, makes it 230 million TVs. Now, someone would ask that how could you arrive at 20 million? So the author tells us that he pulled it right out the air. But I justified it by naming the venues that make up that number, which was restaurants, hotels, airports, hospitals, nursing homes, and sports bars. You may want to add that number, the number of TVs might have been higher. But today, many people watch TV on their computers or tablets or even phones. Coming to the next question, which is how many garden houses were sold in the US last year alone? How many garden hoses? Determine the US population and break it down by household. Estimate the number of households in the suburbs and in rural areas. Calculate the number of those households and that have a yard and are in need of a garden hose. Add in businesses that use garden hoses to get a total. Estimate the life of a garden hose. So now assumption 320 million Americans, 3.2 people per household. So 100 million households. I'm going to estimate that 50% of the households are either suburban or rural. That makes 50 million households each. Now, I'll assume that 20% of those homes are apartments or condos. That narrows us down to 40 million households that most likely use a garden hose. Garden hoses are relatively inexpensive, so people are likely to have two hoses, a hose in the front yard and a hose in the backyard. That makes it 80 million hoses. To that number, I'd add to like another 10 million hoses, which can be found in nurseries, zoos, and other outdoor facilities. Most of those businesses have at least two hoses. We are now up to 90 million garden hoses. Hoses aren't replaced every year. I'd say that they are replaced every 3 years unless they run into the business end of a dog's tooth. So if we take 90 million hoses, divide that number by 3 and come up with 30 million garden hoses sold each year. So the last step was very necessary according to me. We calculated that okay, the consumption is 90 million garden hoses, but yes, no one is buying 90 million hoses each year. So we had to divide it by some number because the question specifically asked us how many garden hoses were sold in the last year alone. Now coming to the third type of the questions, which is the worldwide market sizing questions. Whether you get a worldwide market sizing case, don't start with 8 billion people and whittle your way down. Instead, pick one country, make assumptions, and then extrapolate out. Okay. So worldwide market sizing questions tell us that you have a task to find out the market size of a particular phone. Let's say iPhone. So instead of going huge directly about the whole world, just start with a with a good company, with a good country like US or maybe the UK, where the sale is very good, and then explore it out. So pick one country, US, determine the number of units sold in that country, and extrapolate out. Assumption: the US makes up 10% of all wearables sold. Okay, so the question in our point was that how many wearable units will be sold worldwide this year? Smartwatches fitness trackers, etc. So the US makes up about 20% of all the wearables sold. Population of the US is 320 million. Assume even distribution among the ages. Estimate the number of units bought by each generation. Walk the interviewer through your thought process for each generation. So in 0 to 20, you have 80 million people. Many of these people are basic, very small kids or people going to school. They don't need a fitness tracker. But for the sake of sanity, we will take 2 million people. In 21 to 40, that is a good chunk. 80 million people, let's say out of 15 million, will be having wearables. From 41 to 60, again 10 million, and 61 to 80, 8 million. So that makes a total 25 million. So if the US bought 25 million variables, and because they make up 10% of all the units sold, then the number of variables sold worldwide is 250 million. Now coming to the last type of uh, question in market sizing questions. Yeah. Pro preposterous cases. Preposterous cases. Preposterous market sizing questions are usually standalone questions. These are asked not only to test out your math skill, but also to see how you handle the absurd. Pardon me, I'll just understand the meaning of preposterous. Preposterous means silly, ridiculous, or not to be taken seriously. Okay, which means a silly question that it doesn't make very much sense. It can't be categorized into three questions: the household, the age, generation, and the world market sizing questions. Okay, so they are basically to see out how well do we do math in our head. The best advice is to roll with the punches, do the best you can, but have fun with it. Interviewers love people who love solving problems. So keep a sense of humor and attack it logically. There are questions like how many jelly donuts fit into the Leaning Tower of Pisa. This question makes no sense at all. But yes, that is what our job is, to make sense in things that generally people can't find sense in. So, uh, or other questions are how many slices of pizza does it take to reach to the moon? Or how much does a 747 weigh? I would be shocked if you received a preposterous question from a consulting firm. These are often given by companies that don't have a lot of practice or skills in giving case questions. It's a little scary to think, after how many years of school, that your job comes down to a question like this. So that makes up the market sizing questions, the generational questions, the household questions, and the world market sizing questions. So the main approach that we followed for all these questions was that don't directly jump to the answer. Start with a basic small assumption. Then within that assumption, divide it into different factors, uh, like like we did for the age, we divide into generations. For households, we divide into low income, middle income, and high income. Divided into different fields, I would say. Then for each field, make an assumption, calculate it, total it, find the result, and convey the result. And if the final answer doesn't make sense, it seems too high or too slow, then just change your start assumption. Generally, consulting firms won't ask you to go through the process again, because what they were testing out was the logic behind your thinking. They don't expect you to make a correct assumption. They just want you to to have a very logical process out of it. So from the next session, I will be reading factor questions and more questions. So this is a very interesting book. I would love to read more about it. Thank you.